Hello friends, welcome back to our channel. And in this video, we are going to cover the front-end interview experience of Yum Digital and Tech India company, which is headquartered in Louisville, USA. And the role for this interview was STE intern role. And it is for the fresher candidate. And the duration for this interview was 90 minutes. So let's cover the question that were asked during the interviews. And before moving on to that, if you are new to my channel, then please subscribe to the channel and press the notification bell icon so that you will never miss an updates from us. So let's get started. So the first question that was very common for all the interviews, that was introduce myself. So I have introduced myself. I have listed out my hobbies, my education background, and my technical skills and all. And then he asked me the question from my project that I did. So then he asked some cross question from it. So you can also prepare yourself from all the aspects related to your project, where you can like uh, ready yourself for the questions why you choose this project, what is the motivation behind this project, what is unique in your project, and then if you are implementing database connectivity, then if you are implementing a relational database, then he can ask what if you are implementing non-relational database, what would be the benefit. So these type of question that can be asked. So that was the question that was asked to me. And the next question was like he started asking me from the HTML part. So the first question that he asked to me was, what are the semantic tags in HTML? So semantic tags are those tags which define its content, like meaning. These tags are specifies its meaning to the browser as well as the developer. Like for example, form tag or table tag. So there are several tags which define its content. So these are the HTML semantic tags. So the next question that he asked to me was, what are the tags introduced in HTML5? So in HTML version 5, the tags that were introduced, so they are we have canvas tag, we have audio video tag, and we have article tag. So we can draw the shapes, we can accommodate the audios and video file in our HTML document. So these are the tags that can help us to do those implementation. And the next part is like, what are the data list tags? So data list tags are basically, it provides a suggestion that the user can select one of the option given or can enter some entirely different value. So this is basically the data list tag. And the second is the, what are inline or block elements. So inline elements are basically those elements which only occupy the necessary space for the content and will start from the same line. And in case of block element, it won't start from the same line. It will start from the new line, and it will take the full width of the content, full width of the screen. So that is basically the inline and the block element. And the example for inline elements are we have span tag, we have anchor tag, we have label tag. And the examples for the block elements are like, we have div tag, we have input tag. So these are the elements, HTML elements. And the next, he started asking me question from the CSS part. So the first question that he asked to me was, what are the types of CSS? So there are three types of CSS. The first one is the inline CSS. So in inline CSS, we write our CSS code in the style attribute of an HTML element. And the second is the internal CSS, where we used to write our CSS code in the style tag inside the head tag. And the third part is the external CSS, where we used to write our CSS code in a separate .css extension file. So these are the three types of CSS. And the second question that he asked to me was, what is Flexbox? So Flexbox basically stands for flexible box, and it is just used to specify or used to handle the layout of the page, and as well as it is used to distribute the space between the HTML elements. For example, we have display as a flex, we have a flex direction, column or row reverse or column reverse, we have justify content, we have flex wrap. So we have several properties that are used inside the flexbox property. And the next question was, what is the meaning of display as a flex? So basically, display as a flex means we are placing our content in a horizontal way in a same line. So that is basically display as a flex. The next question that he asked to me was difference between display as a none and visibility hidden. So they both work in a similar way. Like they both will hide the content from the screen. But in case of display none, it will like it won't take the space. But in case of visibility hidden, the content is like will be hidden, but it will take or it will occupy the space on our web page. So that is the difference. And the next question that he asked to me was, what is a CSS specificity? So basically, like when an HTML element or a group of element is targeted by multiple CSS selectors, then the rule of like CSS specificity tell the browser which CSS declaration should be applied. So that is basically a task of prioritization. So that is basically like CSS specificity. And the next question that he asked to me was, what are CSS preprocessor and why they are used? So basically in CSS we have three preprocessor. The first one is the SASS, and the second one is SCSS, and the third one is LESS. So basically, these processors are used just to extend the functionalities of the vanilla CSS. So this is basically the working of CSS preprocessor, and SCSS is like based on the indentation. Like we do not have to write our CSS code inside the curly bracket, but unlike SASS, we used to write our CSS code inside the curly bracket in case of CSS. So that is the CSS preprocessor. And then he asked me a question, like a coding question, like how to align a div tag to the center. So I was like written the CSS code like display as a flex, and then I write align item as a center, and then I write justify content as center. So that will help me to align the divisor to the center of the page. So that is the question. And then he has started asking me question about the JavaScript part. So the first question that he asked to me was, what is DOM? So DOM is basically stands for document object model, and DOM is basically it is an object that gets created when a browser tries to render a HTML page. So basically, we in our HTML document page we have multiple tags like HTML tag, hit tag, body tag. So basically, DOM is like your tree data structure which specifies those HTML tag in a specific hierarchy. So this is basically DOM. And the next question is asked to me was the function of the arrays. So in array we have multiple functions in JavaScript, like we have array.map, array.filter, array.reduce, array.pop, array.push, shift, unshift, and many more. And then he asked question about the Ajax. So Ajax is basically like Ajax is not a programming language. Ajax is just used to handle the asynchronous operation in JavaScript, and it stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And it is basically used if I'm creating a page using Ajax, then the page will get update without reloading the page. So that is also one benefit of Ajax. Like it won't reload the page, refresh the page after updating it. So that is the Ajax part. And the second is why we used it. So we use it for the asynchronous operation. Like if I want to fetch the data from the server, so I can use Ajax, making the object of XML HTTP request. So this is the process. And then he asked me is there any alternative way to make the HTTP call? So yes, there is other alternative ways. We can make the HTTP, or we can get the data from the server using fetch API, fetch in JavaScript, or in React we can use Axios library. So that is the answer for this question. And then he asked me what are promises. So promises are basically like it is used to handle the asynchronous operations in JavaScript, and there are like three states in promise. So promises are the first state is the pending state, which defines the initial state of the promise. The second is the fulfilled state, which specifies the success, or like there is no any error inside our code. And the third part is the reject part, and it gets invoked when an error is thrown. So this is the three states in a promise in JavaScript. So basically, promises is used to avoid the problem of callback help. So that is basically the promises. And then he asked me what is event loop. So event loop is basically, again, it is used in asynchronous operation in JavaScript. Like if I'm implementing some line of asynchronous JavaScript code, so the control of my program will not wait for 2 or 3 seconds if I'm writing code in our set timeout. So our program execution control will not wait for 2 or 3 seconds. So it won't wait for those 2 or 3 seconds. So it directly jump onto the second line, like next line. So, like in event loop, it is basically those like asynchronous function or asynchronous part of JavaScript program will placed inside the callback queue, and when the callback call stack gets emptied, then the event loop will check the callback queue, and is there any and if is there any function to be executed and placed inside the callback queue, then the event loop will pop that function or pop the execution context of the function and placed it inside the callback call stack so that it get executed. So basically, in short, event loop is just used to monitor the callback queue as well as the call stack. And the next question was like difference between map method and the for each method. So for each method is like both the methods are used to iterate the array elements, but in case of map, we get the or we like it returns the new array, and in case of for each, it just returns the older array with some modification. So that is the difference between map and for each. And then he asked question from like what is event bubbling. So event bubbling is it is like a method of event propagation in like DOM APIs. But in event bubbling, the event is first captured and handled by the innermost element and then propagated to the outermost element. So it is basically a process that gets started with the element that triggered the event and then bubbles up to the containing element in the hierarchy. And it is just like using that add event listener method. So inside the add event listener method, we pass three arguments. First is the like type of event, like clicking or mouse press or on hover. So we pass the type of the event. Second, we pass the callback function, which we want to call when the event of the specified type occurs. And the third part is the user capture, where we like pass the boolean value. So by default, the use capture value is false, and it means it is in the bubbling phase. So that is basically the event bubbling. And the next question was like, what is hoisting in JavaScript? So hoisting in JavaScript is basically an unknown behavior or a default behavior of JavaScript, where the declaration are moved on top of the current scope. So that is basically hoisting. And then he asked me to target the password field and print its value on the console using DOM element. So basically, what he like told me. So basically, he opened me the GitHub profile, and then like at the sign in page, we will see username as well as the password field. So he told me to write some any random value inside the password field, and just let me and show me what you have written inside this password field by on the console by using those DOM elements. Like by the help of those DOM elements, you have to print the value which you have written inside the password field on the console. So what I was like doing. So I was like getting ID of the password field. So the ID was password itself. So I was just like writing the document.get element by ID, and inside the parentheses I have passed the password, which is my ID for that password field. And after that, like document.get element by ID, and inside I have written password, and then I write dot value. So after like writing the dot value, I will get the value which I have written the random value inside the password field. So that was the answer for this question. And then he asked me what are callbacks in JavaScript. So callbacks are basically the function that passed as an argument to another function are basically callbacks. And then he asked me what are the higher order functions. So higher order function is uh, basically the function that operates on other function either by taking them as argument or by returning them. So these are the higher order function. And then he like gave me one example like an object in a JavaScript which was a list of person, and then he asked me to like filter the name of the person with which are 30 years old. So he was like given me a set of data, and then he asked me to filter out the name of the person who is less than 30 years of old. So I was like making that function, and that was like easier code. So that was the question from like JavaScript coding part, and then he started asking me the question from the ReactJs part. So the first question that he asked to me was, what is React? So React is basically a JavaScript library, and it is open source cross-platform and declarative library, and it is used to create the single page application, and it is like focusing on the view part of the MVC architecture. So that is React. And then he asked me like I was answered like React is a JavaScript library. So then he asked me like, what is the difference between library and framework? So library is basically the predefined code which is like only focusing on the specific part of the specific functionality of the software. But in case of framework, framework will like it is also a predefined code, but it like focuses on the entire architecture, entire layout or structure of the web application or a software. So that is the difference. And the second question that he asked me was, what are the features of React? So React is basically open source, as well as the it is like it follows the component based architecture. So we are like using those reusable components. So component reusability is one of the feature, and the second feature is like server side rendering. It allows server side rendering, which also makes it SEO friendly. So that is the like features of React, and it uses virtual DOM, which makes it which improve its performance. So these are the basically the features of React. And the next he asked me was difference between React and Angular. So React is basically created and maintained by the Facebook team, and Angular is created and maintained by the Google team. And React is basically focuses on the view part of the MVC architecture, but in Angular it focuses on the complete MVC. And in React we use virtual DOM, and in Angular we use like we use only the real DOM. And in React we use like it provides the server side rendering, but in Angular it provides the client side rendering. So these are the like the difference between React and Angular. And React is a library and Angular is a framework of JavaScript. So this is the basically the difference. And then he asked me like how the React works. So basically React maintains React uses virtual DOM. So virtual DOM is basically the virtual copy of the real DOM. So every time in our React application, it maintains two DOM, like two virtual DOM, for like if we do some change, or if we do any change in our like React component, then the virtual DOM will get update, and then the updated virtual DOM will get will get compared with the previous virtual DOM. And if there is any like match, or if there is any difference found, then only that component will get updated. So that is like the benefit of using React application, because directly manipulating real DOM is like a expensive process, and it takes a lot of memory wastage. So that's why we use virtual DOM, which makes our application more faster. So in virtual DOM, we just it always gets created when we change or when we do some change in our React component. So every time a new virtual DOM gets created, and then the newly created virtual DOM will get compared with the previous virtual DOM, and if there is any difference between them, then only the real DOM will get updated. So like here, for every change, we are not like changing the real DOM. We are directly comparing between the virtual DOM, and then we are just directly implementing it in our like UI. So that is the working of React. And then he asked me like, how can you optimize your application? So there are multiple ways of optimizing our application. Like we can use pure component in React, we can use memo in React, and we can also use lazy loading, and we can use CDN hosting. So there are multiple ways. Like we can also resize or reduce the size of our images. So there are multiple ways of optimizing our React application. And then he asked me like, what are the lifecycle methods of React component? So, in every React component, there are basically three phases. So the first phase is the mounting phase, second is the updating phase, and third is the unmounting phase. So in the mounting phase of the React component, like the all HTML elements or the elements are putting inside the DOM. So that is the mounting phase. And second is the updating phase, where it was like there are if there is any change in the state or the props, then then the component gets updated and re-render again. And the third part is the unmounting phase, where like the HTML elements get removed or destroyed from the DOM. So these are the three phases, and in every phases there are several functions that are used or methods are used. So the first in the mounting phase, the methods that are used are like constructor, is a special function that gets called when a component is created. So and then we have like get derived state from props, which is a static method, and it is a place which is used to set the state based on the initial props, and it gets invoked before the component is rendered. So and then we have render method, which is like always return a single HTML React element. And the next function or the method that is used in the first mounting phase is component did mount. So component did mount is like invoked when component is rendered. So that is the component did mount. And the next is the updating phase, where the first function that was used is the get derived state from props, which is again same. And the second is like should component update, which returns a boolean value which tells whether the React component like should continue with the rendering or not. And the third is the again the render method, and the fourth one is the should get snapshot before update. So by invoking this function, we can get the value of these of the props even before updating it or after the updating of the component. And the fifth one is the component did update. So that is invoked when the component is re-rendered and updated with the new state, with the new data. And the last phase and the last method used in the React component lifecycle is the component will unmount. So that gets called just before removing of elements from the DOM. So that is like component will unmount. So this is the function that gets called. And the next question that he asked to me was, how can we send data from one component to another? So we can send data from one component to another by using props. So we can pass props, which is like a sort of head of properties. So we can send the data from one, like we can set the data in our parent component, and we can send the data to the other component. So then he asked me was what are state and props. So states are basically immutable in nature, and states are specific within a component. But props are basically read only, and it cannot be changed. So they are like immutable in nature, and they are like used to send data from one component to another. And then he asked me a function lifecycle method of a React component, which is should component update. So should component update always return a new value, like new boolean value. So basically, it tells that whether the component should should continue with the rendering or not. So that is basically uh, a should component update method. So the next question that he asked to me was, can we send data from child component to parent component? So yes, we can send data from child component to parent component using the callback method. We can create the callback method, and then we pass the props, and we can send the data from child component to parent component using those callback methods. And the next question that he asked me was, what are higher order component? So basically, higher order component are again same as the higher order function in JavaScript, but in higher order component, it takes the component, it takes a component as an output, as well as it returns a new component as a output. So this is basically the higher order component, and it is used when we are writing the same line of code again and again for a similar feature in our React application. So we used to write that similar functionality in the form of higher order component, and then we can access it. So this is basically where the higher component are used. And the next question that he asked to me was, what is prop drilling? So prop drilling is basically a process of passing data from one component via several interconnected component to the component that needs it. So this is basically the prop drilling. And then he asked me how can we avoid it? So we can avoid it using the context APIs. So and in a larger application, we can also use Redux. So Redux is also a state management library. So basically, we can use in a smaller application by using or by creating the context. So first we have to create the context, then we have to provide some value to the context, and then we call where the where data have to pass down to the hierarchy which needs it. So there we can use the user consume consuming the context value. So there are three steps in the context API. First is creating the context value. Second is providing the context value. The third is consuming the context value. So by the help of context APIs or Redux, we can avoid the prompt drilling phenomena. And the next question that he asked to me was from DSA part. So he asked like what are stack and queue data structure. So stack is basically a data structure that works on the LIFO property, last in first out, and queue is a data structure that works on the principle of FIFO, like first in first out. So that was the simple question, and then he asked me like what write a program to find the intersection of two arrays. So again, it is a common question, and I made it like using sets in a JavaScript. So that was again the common question of like JavaScript or a DSA part. So you can attempt this question by your own, and so that was like the end of the interview and the question. And if your friends find it useful and if it helps you in any way, then please like this video and share it with your friends. And if you are still not subscribing our channel, then please subscribe our channel for more videos. And thanks for watching, friends. See you in the next video.